I think talking about the relative value of the three domains of freedom is pretty interesting. And a lot of your focus is, of course, on the life planning aspect because you're in the financial world. And I put that as the second domain of freedom. And the first domain being that each moment is yours. I think the first domain is the most profound because it gives you everything. But if I were to advise anyone, one of my teenage daughters, anyone, just out of the blue, which of those three would you go to first? Get life planned. Live your life plan. What life planning is really about is it's designing who it is that you've always known you really want to be, and then making sure it happens and happens in short order. Usually, it's a matter of months that we do in the evoke process. And at most, it's 2 or 3 years. That's the story of your life. You keep telling yourself as you're going through your life, oh, darn, I can't do this. Oh, they're blocking me here, there, whatever. Oh, if only I could do that. So we make sure that happens. And then once you have that and you feel that, then you can go anywhere and you can go back to the moments and you have the courage because you have the story of your life as you want it to manifest. You have the courage to go out and tackle these larger issues about humanity that are so urgent right now.
Welcome to the Real Retirement Show. My name is Yasmin, here with my co-host, Kathleen. Today's episode is more than just a conversation, it's a gift. We are honored to welcome a true pioneer, visionary, and gentle force of transformation, George Kinder. If you've ever wondered what it means to truly live with freedom, purpose, and authenticity, this is the episode that will stay with you long after the credits roll. George is globally known as the father of the life planning movement, but that only scratches the surface. He is a poet of possibility, a relentless champion of personal truth, and a mentor to thousands of financial professionals across 30-plus countries, helping them guide clients towards lives filled not just with wealth, but with meaning. He's the founder of the Kinder Institute of Life Planning, creator of the profound EVOKE process, and author of timeless books like The 7 Stages of Money Maturity, Life Planning for You, and his latest, The 3 Domains of Freedom. For over 5 decades, he's woven together the practices of mindfulness, creative expression, and financial integrity into a movement that empowers people to dream boldly and actually live those dreams. In today's conversation, George shares how his life's journey began with a deep hunger for freedom and truth, what it takes to sustain passion and purpose over 30 years even when swimming against the current, the deeper dimensions of trustworthiness and why it's the foundation of all real relationships, why freedom is not just a personal journey, but a human right we're all called to protect, and how the wisdom of nature, poetry, and presence can help guide us through life's transitions, including retirement. We'll also explore how George is evolving his legacy, with his recent move to London in a bold new workshop series that brings the concept of fiduciary duty beyond finances into society, into organizations, and into the heart of humanity. This episode is full of heart, humility, and hope, a rare opportunity to sit with someone who is quietly and powerfully shaping what it means to live well. So settle in, you're about to hear from someone who doesn't just talk about living authentically, he embodies it. Thank you, George, for joining us.
My pleasure. I've heard about you guys and now I get to meet you. So it's wonderful.
You have huge, huge footsteps to try and walk in.
Oh, gosh. I'm a little guy, really.
You have such incredible heart and presence, and the commitment that you have been on this path for many decades, and the impact that you've made has really been resounding. And we are just so really honored and delighted to share with you a conversation to learn about your journey as well as, what's next.
Wonderful. I'm really looking forward to it.
I love your story. I feel like I know you. And it's an odd situation now trying to craft my concept, my impression, the influence, the astonishment. I don't know how many words I can use, but to be perfectly honest, I was so incredibly impressed by what you've accomplished over the last 30
Well,
plus years. It's just monumental. It's inspirational, and I'm just so excited to learn a little bit more about how you got here. It's an incredible journey, and how you sustain that, because we're on a similar journey, and that some of the people just, they're not in the boat with us yet. And so as we paddle from one shore to another, picking up passengers and hopefully, getting from, well, we've gone from a rowboat to maybe a schooner, and hopefully we'll get to something like the Queen Elizabeth or the Queen Britannia or whatever, that boat that now you're going to be very probably a part of if you go and have a look at it. I'm excited for you and your journey in London. It's one of my favorite cities as well.
oh, thank you. I'm really lucky to be here.
I am just so impressed with what you have accomplished over the last 30 years. This was an adventure that few people would even think of taking. And the courage that you had to swim, I don't want to say upstream, but certainly against the current.
Yeah.
And I'm curious as to how you were able to, fight the force against you, and what you used to maintain the momentum that you've continued over the last 30 years.
Well, you know enough about my work and about life planning to know
Yes.
that what we do in life planning, what life planning advisors do, is they design through trustworthiness. And by the way, thank you so much for that wonderful article. And my friend Charlie Green and Rob Galford did workshops with both Charlie and Rob did workshops with my wife, Kathy, who's part of this fiduciary movement. But I'm digressing. But the first thing, of course, is building trustworthiness. But what we're most famous for, and I think what people grasp most quickly, is that we create a dream of freedom
Mm.
for a person, and then we deliver it. Now, you can't design that. It's artificial. You can't design it without building that quality of trustworthiness that you guys know very well. But for myself, to fight the force, I mean, it goes back to birth, really. I mean, I came out of the womb fighting for freedom. Boy, it really does. And I've got stories about that, but we're not going to go back that far here. I knew early on, I was passionate to live a life of freedom myself. So it starts with yourself. It has to start with yourself.
Mm.
And you can't be a great advisor unless you've lived your dream, unless you're living your dream of freedom. You can't be a great listener unless you can listen really deeply and subtly and profoundly to yourself. I'd already done a lot of that interior work, but I think that when you say fight the force, man, I mean that's having that dream, having it in front of you, and knowing I'm going for it. It doesn't matter what force gets in the way. I'm going for it. This is the right thing. I know it's the right thing. There'll be a few people that will join me along the way, and sure enough, the best of people joined along the way. And so that to fight the force, it's really that your dream is strong,
Mm.
and life planning helps with that, obviously. And my dream was strong. I really believe in freedom. That's huge for me. As much as I'm promoting this fiduciary in all things, I think fiduciary in all things is essential if we are to have freedom available for everybody. And that's my goal. It's like this is a humanity goal, and it's time for that. The globalization and of where we are in the world and the scale that we take things to. But the other question is, how did I maintain it, right? You're going, so how did I keep going? I think the other thing is I felt I had very little to lose. That's helpful too. I never put the dollar, or now that I'm in the UK, the pound, ahead of me and say, that's my goal. A lot of people do. And most people that will be listening to this podcast, they've been told your business comes first and you got to have the goals. There's the 20% rule and all that kind of stuff. I never did that. I always felt that what was most important was the truth and was delivering freedom. First, learning to live it myself, delivering it to myself, but then seeing how to deliver it to others. And Kathleen, I was passionate about it. And I just kept returning to that passion. Like I didn't have it on the refrigerator door, but you could, the image on the refrigerator door, there's your image of freedom. Anyway, that's what it was for me. A lot of passion.
there's no question that you still maintain that passion. And now it's become infectious because anyone who listens to some of your podcasts, reads your books. Now, here's another really deep question for you.
Yeah.
You have left the serenity of your cabin and the environment in which you started your morning, did your meditations, began your day until you were ready to write. How are you going to replicate that now that you're in the city of London?
I have a dear friend in Massachusetts, one of my very best friends for many years, who is a wonderful student of painting. He's a great painter in and of himself. He was, I forget what the term is, but would heal 19th century American paintings in this hub on Newbury Street in Boston. He is, as I am, fond of paintings from all over the world. And one of the ways that we linked up early on was our love of Chinese landscape paintings. And they have influenced, and I see Yasmin nodding, and I know they've influenced art throughout Asia, Vietnamese art, Japanese art. And so we've both been passionate about it. And one of the things he said to me, he said, George, in a lot of those landscapes, Chinese landscapes that are so beautiful and so spacious, that spaciousness speaks to the profound nature of consciousness, of our awakening, really. They speak to it. But he said, that little cabin that's often there in those landscapes. Yeah, that's the cabin, Kathleen. And he said, that's the symbol of enlightenment. And I said, what?
Wow.
I based, of course, this whole 30 years of what I think of my legacy is actually my books of poetry and photography, putting them together in ways that draw upon the calligraphy. I didn't do calligraphy, but it really is the same thing as the great arts in Asia of calligraphy and great painting. So that cabin, you're right. It's not just the serenity of it, but it was a practice. Every day, I wanted to know what the nature of the present moment was. And I spent 30 years exploring that. And my hunch was that it had a great deal to do with Mother Nature. Because, think about it. When you go, here we are, we're all in these rooms, right? We got four corners and all, four walls. But when we walk outside, immediately there's something that comes alive in us. And whether it's the breeze that subtly touches us or subtle temperature differences, the slight changes in humidity, but something's alive. And it's not just the sounds of birds, it's Mother Nature making connection to us. And it's moment by moment, and it happens much more rapidly than thought. In fact, there's a recent Scientific American article that in December that talked about how we're actually experiencing that information 100 million times as fast as we think. And that's the power of, coming back to life planning, great listening. And that's the power of mindfulness. So when you say, how am I going to leave that serenity? I did those 30 years so I could bring it with me.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
That is a talent. But I hope it doesn't take us all 30 years to acquire that. Yasmin knows that I live in an area where our backyard is a forest. So
Nice.
I totally understand the ethos about connecting with nature and being there and listening to the birds and watching things grow and develop. And as I think about this, I think about your 3 dimensions of freedom workshops that you're starting in September. How have you taken that, your sense of everything you believe in is freedom? How have you taken that to a workshop kind of philosophy?
Right. So, first of all, I think the book really captures the cabin in a very profound way. And certainly the first third of the book, which is about the first freedom, which is a stunning freedom when you think about it. And at first, it's kind of one of these obvious things. Like Einstein would say, the most profound questions are the ones that children know already or ask. And so that first domain of freedom is that each moment is yours. We might do lip service to it. But we don't really get it, and we don't really take advantage of it, and we don't deepen into it. It's the most profound thing you can have, is because every moment, that's what your life is, each of these moments. So I just want to give a shout out to the book, The Three Domains of Freedom, it is the summary of my life's work, of everything I've done. And it's really simple. And again, I was thinking of some great works from Asia, Lao Tzu's Tao Te Ching, and other works that are that simple. And I wanted to write something that was simple that people could get and read in a sitting. You can read it in an hour and a quarter, although you're so tempted to pause there's a lot of wisdom, I think, in it. So you're tempted to pause with it and really think about it. So I wrote it because it's a way of getting it out to everybody. And I wrote it so people could reflect on it, sit with it, and have it as something they would value at home. And so your question about taking it into a workshop setting is a really interesting one. And the place, and I don't know if you were just alluding to this or not, but gosh, we're in such a crazy time in the world, such a crazy time. And my strength in business, my strength professionally, let's put it that way, has been workshops. I designed a workshop that really has transformed so much. And it's a tiny corner of financial planning or financial advice. The people who are there, those people are powerful, profound people. They're really good practitioners, the best, I think. And so it will have influence in that way. What happened for me, lots of things. I finished the work. I finished that being in the cabin and doing that work and understanding what it was. You probably know how old I am. I know, thank goodness I don't look quite this age, but I'm 77 years old. My golly, in 10 years, I'm going to be 87. And it's, and, that's really, you think that's, well, you should have been retired a long time ago. And my wife, Kathy, and I, we think about, she's almost 10 years younger than me, but we think about where would we want to be if we were retiring? And we thought about, do you go to a retirement center of some sort? And what do we do? And one of our thoughts was, what could be better than the City of London? You can walk out the door just like you can at any retirement center, and everything's there. Everything's there.
True.
And what if we were close to the galleries that we love, the parks that we love, and of course they're good people that I know over the years. I've met people. So that was one thing. And the second thing was there's a devastation that we have to weather whenever we finished a legacy. And that 5-book series of poetry and photography is my legacy. Finished it. What was I going to do next? And then this terrible time that's happening in the world. And I thought, I'd written the 3 domains of freedom. That third domain, I feel really at peace and on target in the first domain of each moment is mine. And I have lived a life that has claimed that your eyes on the prize, that your life is yours. That's that prize the passion I was talking about. But the third domain of freedom really requires all of us. It's something that's about all of us. It's about humanity. And we're really not there, and we should be. Each one of us, look at this. Each one of us has one of these, right?
Yep.
We all do. All over the world. Do you know, I think it's 90%. I think I wrote about this in the book. It's 90% of humanity has a smartphone. Well, imagine if this smartphone that we all have was required and did to speak the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Oh, what a world that would be.
Imagine. Yeah. And wouldn't we as humanity now, not, this camp over here and this camp over here and this warrior camp over here, but wouldn't we as humanity, wouldn't we be able to make good decisions? We might differ. We live in different places. We're in different circumstances. We're different ages. We have families or we don't. We have different ideas. But still, if it told the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, don't you think humanity could make wise decisions?
Yeah.
I do.
I do too.
So why aren't we doing it? So that hit me, and I thought, I want to make that happen. I realized, again, I can just do a small bit, but I want to make that happen. And America didn't feel like the safest place to do it in right now. I don't, my attitude toward bullies, I don't take kindly to bullies. And in America right now, it's standing up to a bully. If you're Bruce Springsteen, you can do it.
That's right.
Thank God there's one boss in America, as they say. But
I just want to touch on that a little bit. I don't know if you knew I was Canadian.
Oh, wow, that's so cool. Yay, so we're
So
got
you
yeah,
you know what King Charles just did.
I do,
He put
yes.
the bully in his place.
Absolutely. And so I thought I can do it in the UK. And then I went through a huge, very difficult process. It took me 3 months to write a business plan. I'd never written a business plan before in my life. And I wanted to make sure that they honored it because there's a rare visa that they give out called Innovator Founder Visa.
Yes.
And there's only a few hundred a year they give out. And often it takes months for them to make the decision. The endorsing body made its decision on my proposal in 9 days.
Wow. Congratulations.
Yeah. So basically the workshop is to take these ideas of freedom into business where we really think it's profit that it's all about and give them yet another alternative, the fiduciary to B Corps to the profit model and to bring it to their people, to the workforce,
Right.
to give them a sense of freedom.
George, as you've taught and shared your wisdom in this movement with more than 6,000 people over 30 plus countries, I'm curious if you found different regions or countries or pockets like the UK that are embracing this type of mindset, this type of philosophy about freedom, about the fiduciary of making that type of a difference in people's lives.
As a child, as a young man, I never in a million years thought I would be able to have any influence at all in another country, much less 30 countries. And so it's been a joy. I love the word in your background there, Yasmin, joy. It's been a joy and a pleasure and a great honor. And different things happen, obviously cultures are different. And over here in England, there's the stiff upper lip. But everywhere I go, everywhere I went, I had people say everywhere in every culture, they say, oh, this will never land here.
Oh, yeah.
In every culture, they'd say, this will never land here. And they say, you in America, you've got that therapy stuff and you got a soft, squishy stuff. And I said, yeah, sure. We got red states and blue states. And do you know what? People in the red states love it as much as people in the blue states. This is about being a human being. And that's ultimately what happened was that people recognized that. What we've had to do, because we haven't had, it's not like we went out and sought big bucks from funders. And I think it's helped us not seeking that out. But because we haven't had that, we go with the low hanging fruit. Where do people grab it immediately? And where can they pay enough that we can make it happen? And it's helped. But everywhere I've gone, it's people have loved it. And as I'm looking at you all, I'm thinking of India, which is I wish I could go back much more, and I wish it was more affordable for them, because they have really embraced it. They really loved it. I took my golden civilization conversations to them, and they just ate it up. But the places where it's been strongest are places that historically have stood for freedom and democracy. So it's the three strongest have been the US, the UK, and the Netherlands. And the Netherlands has been a lovely bridge to other European countries because they speak so many languages over there. So that's mostly what it's been.
Well, Yasmin, I could ask a million questions, but I'm going to just let go a little bit here because I'm just, I am motivated. I guess that's the word. Every time you speak, it motivates me to do something that I haven't done. I'm going to tell you, I'm going to be 74 in 10 days.
No way.
So,
You look at least 20 years younger than me. Oh, God, can't
so
believe
I felt the same way. What should I be doing at this point in my life? I agree with you. If you have a mission and if you're so passionate about something, age has nothing to do with it.
Right.
It
Right.
just means, I think, you have to travel a little faster.
There are definitely challenges because there's a part of you that's slowing down in various ways, and you have to deal with that. But if you are passionate, where there's a will, there's a way, and you find it.
Yeah. George, I'd love to dive a little bit deeper into your journey through this life planning movement that you've inspired and really moved forward. And I'm curious, where is it now and where could it be? Because my observation at this point is we're still at the early stage of adoption and there seems to be some either lack of awareness or appreciation for the impact that it could make. And so I'm curious to get your view from a historical as well as the present and what it could look like in the future in terms of adoption and really the rollout of more experiences like this.
Yeah, I'm optimistic by nature. Uh, so don't trust me on this, yes.
I love that.
But I am it's I think it's intimately tied up with the notion of fiduciary.
Mm.
And I really do. And the partly because when I'm talking about fiduciary in all things and taking that notion into businesses, that's a whole new ballgame. And that's as revolutionary in many ways as life planning was at the very beginning. When you ask about it at the very beginning, a huge percentage of the financial advisors in the world were salespeople. And then those who weren't were lawyers or had legal kind of backgrounds. They were all about contracts and putting things together and in legal frameworks and that kind of thing. And and so I acted on the scene with what they interpreted as, this is a fair interpretation, as the psychology of money
Mhm.
Mhm.
and teaching people to be therapists in the world. And of course, quite soon thereafter, it's not a major split, but because so many friends in the financial therapy world, but I said, no, it's simpler than therapy. And it's much easier. And it really has to do with just building a sense of trust in the relationship with your client and then catching fire and helping them catch fire. And here's how you do the catching fire. And that's really all you need to do. And that's a lot of a great therapy is that. But I felt you didn't need to go back in the past and figure things out. All you need to do was build a bond of trust so that people could go through the hero's journey of empathy around their tough stuff and feel it internally, feel it from you, the mentor. And then as a consequence of feeling that trustworthiness, they're ready, little sparks you light and whoo, boy, takes off. And so that was the kind of the essence that I boiled it down to, even though Seven Stages is really a psychology of money book. And we still do the workshop. It's a very important workshop. And many of the people who started the financial therapy movement came from major trainings that I gave. So you ask where it's been and where it is now and where it will be. We get fiduciary is a term that in America we find it often lost in this right now and still in the world of pensions, and it's very legalistic and it's got terms and I'll throw out something about, hey, fiduciary means putting your client first. And they'll go into all these legal details or sales details or something. I go, no, yeah, that's fine, but this is what it really means. And this is what I'm really pitching right now. And I'm building, I think what you've just shared at the beginning, Kathleen and Yasmin, your appreciation for the work that I've done, it gives me a platform, even though I don't think it's really very much. If you look at how few the numbers are, yeah, it's 6,000 or it's six or 700, whatever, but that's still very small in relation to the world, in relation to financial advice. But the the purity of it, the strength of it, I think it's the best model out there for this kind of work. And that strength that it has gives me an ability to talk and to reach larger audiences.
Mhm.
And right now, I think what the world needs is trustworthiness.
100%.
Yeah, Kathleen, as you're saying that, and Yasmin, as you're nodding, one of the things I've encouraged people to do around fiat is to take it to their kitchen table, gather their friends around the kitchen table and dining room table, whatever it is, and have a conversation and ask them just one really simple question. Because what we're trying to do with fiat is to make fiduciary in all things, including fiduciary toward the truth and
Mm.
toward democracy, toward people, and toward the planet. What if it were the law of the land? What if every institution that you encountered as you walk through your day was trustworthy toward you in every possible way? What if the world was like that? How would your world change? How would your life change? And we ask it in, it's a great kitchen table kind of conversation, get people to think about it. I had my kids and I had children late in life. So they're just, they're still in college and they brought their friends and we had some other friends around. And one of the kids said, and this reflects on this dystopian time that we're in. One of the kids said, well, that would be incredible. I think it would be so incredible that I would actually think about having kids.
Wow.
Think about that. Yeah. Yeah. Think about that. This is how dark it's become generationally. Other people just said, oh my God, it would be so much ease in my life would happen. And other people have said, oh, I'd have so much freedom to do what I want to happen. So I think it's tied to that. And that's that's where I'm pushing right now. I'm trying to make it much broader in that way. But the Three Domains of Freedom workshop, as you probably gather, 1/3 of it is about life planning. So I'm getting to bring life planning into businesses. And one of my passions that hasn't developed, and part of this is low hanging fruit. And how does it happen? I think life planning belongs to everybody. I think it's a shame that I mean, I love my advisors dearly, all the ones that have studied, but I think it belongs to everybody. Everybody's got a dream of freedom. If you link up to that passion, they can deliver so much more into the world. And I think it's a shame that we haven't yet fully brought it, whether it's the foundation, whether it's NEFI or it's the Foundation for Financial Planning. I think it's a shame that we haven't brought it yet to everybody. So that's one of the things about bringing it into business. You're bringing it to the workforce.
I love what you said. And I think this is a really powerful word to take a second and just think about is yet.
Yeah, yeah,
And that kind of speaks to the possibilities and maybe even the responsibilities of what it might take that yet into a now word.
yeah, yeah.
George, you touched on the word trustworthiness quite a bit, and it's like the common core of the theme of your beliefs and approach. And we align with that very much so in our work as well, too. I've always been curious to deconstruct and dissect and understand what creates trustworthiness. And one of the models that have really influenced my thought around this has been one presented by Charles Green and David Maister, the trust equation. And looking at the components that drive trust, whether it be credibility, reliability, intimacy, and self-orientation, I think oftentimes we overlook the intimacy and the self-orientation piece of it. And I find that the
Right,
work that you do and the impact that you're making really emphasize or expands those two components to be able to deepen that trustworthiness in addition to the credibility or the reliability piece. And I'm
right.
curious, what is your perspective on how trustworthiness, how has it evolved over time as we are considering the state of where we are in the world?
Yeah, really good question. And it's still, you got that hard edge of business that thinks still it's just credibility and reliability.
Yeah.
And right, that's their attitude, and they'll brush you off out of their office like that. You're done. I was there. I remember the moment where Charlie added intimacy to the equation. It used to be C plus R divided by self-orientation. And as I mentioned, Rob and Charlie, and maybe David as well, used to give workshops with my wife. So we were connected. Anyway, lots of different connections through the EVOKE trainings as well with Charlie. What people don't realize, just to emphasize, and I want to toss everybody toward your article, which is about this, a recent article you did, Yasmin, but the self-orientation. Intimacy is something that I think is very closely related to the self-orientation. One of the ways that I frame this is that if you think about who among all the advisors that if you were to give a generality of what's the characteristic that makes for the very best advisors? And some people might say, well, they're really technically brilliant. And I think we would all say, no, that's really not it. And what it is that they're great listeners. The best advisors are always the great listeners because those are the ones who really know who you are, so that the advice is really fiduciary. It's tailored to you. And this notion that you can do it by having the cleverest, scheme for a tax product or whatever, is not only old-fashioned, but it's criminal, really. It's just, it shouldn't be happening, but it still does happen some. So the greatest advisors are the great listeners. And among those, you know, where do we find, if we were to do another categorization among those great listeners, who are the best listeners? And I would argue that they're life planners. And it's because in fiduciary, we think fiduciary is about charging, it's about being fee only. And that's one layer of it. But if you really put the client first, it also includes the whole holistic quality of the CFP. And clearly, it involves life planning as well, because our hearts are just right there, connected to the client. So then the question becomes, among the life planners, who are the best? Who are the best listeners? And I think, on average, they're the ones that have the strongest mindfulness practice. And the reason is that what mindfulness does, and yeah, and you can see I've got a map of mindfulness that outlines what happens as you practice it. But what mindfulness does is that it reduces that self-orientation that Charlie references in such a clever way, brilliant way, really. It reduces that self-orientation. For your audience who don't know what that means, it means that normally, you've got your marquee of who I am out there, and you got your PowerPoint that shows who you are and your credentials and everything. But if you have a very low self-orientation, it means that you've pulled yourself out of the equation. And so rather than going, oh, I had something like that, and taking over the conversation by sharing your similarities, you just really give the meeting over to the client. And the client knows that, they feel that. And then that's what leads to their ability to dream with you. So that lowering of self-orientation is really helpful. And when you ask, where are we with that? Well, clearly there's this, you have to go back to what's happening. I mean, you look at the horrible political situation that we're facing right now, and you have to look for a moment at what's going on there. And I want to say something about that and humanity. We talked about the smartphone. This is the first time in human history that we've all been together. It's the first time. We never had this communication possibility. I was talking to someone in Vietnam. Is that where you're from originally, your family of origin, Yasmin?
I'm actually from Vietnam.
That's what I thought. So
Yeah.
I was talking with someone who, in fact, I did a podcast with someone in Vietnam
Mhm.
who was based in America
Mhm.
originally and went over there. And he said, this phone has really changed, because I brought up the same point. He said, my kid can talk to his grandmother in the States every day, easily, every single day. And it used to be, when I first got here, he said, I'd go into a phone booth and, I'd be, counting the minutes and all of this. He said, it's totally revolutionized. So humanity's together. It doesn't feel like it, because the politics we made some mistakes giving more and more power to wealth, basically. And so that power is accumulated, and accumulated in the media, it accumulated in politics, and it accumulated in business. And let me go a few more steps with this, because it's really very interesting. So humanity is really together, and we need to emphasize that, honor that, understand that, and speak to that. All of us, we're heart to heart, person to person, we're together, and we need to do that and emphasize that. And there are a number of things historically that are really interesting, because coming to this place where finally humanity comes together as a species, just astonishing. Not an ethnicity, not a nation state. We're a species, and we can make decisions as a species. That's incredible. But here we are. We have these terrible problems. And before the political situation got so dystopian, we had global warming, right? And that was a major thing. And we think, oh gosh, how did this happen? We have a wonderful term that I know you both are very familiar with, called going to scale. And going to scale is, it's a value we have, right? We want our business to go to scale because we want it to be big and powerful. I'd love your podcast to go to scale. I want to see you guys be really successful with this. Wonderful things. But what happens when we go global as a species and as markets? What happens when we go global, all the good stuff that's there, all what economists call all of the negative externalities that go along with the good stuff also go global.
That's true.
And the reason for that is that goes back to when we first set up the contract for incorporation. We allowed people to get all these benefits, tax benefits, and the main benefit is hierarchy. We allowed them to gather money through capital. Well, that creates a hierarchy right there. It's no longer just me as a sole person. And then they could borrow a whole bunch. Well, that makes the hierarchy even larger. And then they can use their communication, which makes the hierarchy even larger. And now we've made this, terrible thing about, oh, well, a corporation is a person, so they can get involved in democracy. And so that makes the hierarchy even larger. And those negative externalities, because those are not people, those are not human beings. These are artificial organizations, our corporations are. And so what happens is that the worst of humanity comes out and gathers because we're growing for greed or power. So that's why fiduciary, I think, is really compelling. And because if we have a fiduciary standard that's required for every corporation, none of those externalities will come out. If you're still allowed to accumulate the hierarchy of power, but you're required to be a fiduciary to the truth, how could we have social media who's going off on crazy false stories? If you're required to be a fiduciary to democracy, how could you possibly undermine it with your power? And likewise to the planet and to people. You wouldn't have the kinds of inequities. So it all comes together. I don't know if I've gone too far afield, but I think that it links now, this little piece that we're talking about, intimacy and self-orientation, links in a way to the largest piece about how our economics is structured, how civilization is structured, because for the first time, we are humane. That is meant to be humanity's structure. Humanity is civilization. And now we're coming together with a single civilization with many elements and many different ethnicities and cultures and all this. How wonderful. But it's meant to come together with the human heart. And that's fiduciary.
Wow.
Oh, this podcast is not long enough. I can just tell you right now. I've got a tangent I'm going to go off on. When you talk about humanity, people have there's many people who object still to AI because they think the human element isn't involved, and how do we deal with this, and what is it going to mean to our future, and am I going to be lost in all of the negative elements. I'm just curious. I love the way you questioned Dan about his article on this. And for those of you who are listening, it's a wonderful guy. We've actually had him as a podcast guest. I was not available, so I really feel I'm in the dark on that one. I didn't get to participate, but he again is in the UK. And we talked about AI, and of course, you probably know that's a nice structure within our offerings or program, whatever, the way we want to help people. All right. So, what are your thoughts about the future of AI and how we should embrace it or deny it? And for what reasons on each side of the fence? And what do you see the future being?
Great. And I want to say that this is one of the areas that we get polarized and separated. And then strong forces, media forces, political forces, can manipulate us because we're in different camps. So I want to say that's first of all, because we can go out and we can fight global warming, we can fight for democracy, we can fight for truth in media, we can fight for having AI that is responsible and humane, we can fight for equality in so many ways, whether it's gender or income or whatever, and we fight for local issues. And what's happening in every one of those is we're setting a situation up where we can be divided because we don't have a system that responds in a humane way toward everything. There is a way to address this, everything. And so I will address your question about AI, but I think that it's wrong. I think we are short-sighted to focus on any of these individually when the system is going to undermine us. And that system is one that just simply is not fiduciary. So if we don't band together, and it's not that we don't need to fight all those fights, because we do, and they're all important, they're all valuable, but we also need to join together around fiduciary. And if we don't, it won't matter because the powerful forces will make whatever they want eventually happen. So coming back to AI, how could it not be one of the greatest and coolest things that has ever happened to the world? It's stunning what it can do. But if you have a political system that gives the power of it to just the wealthiest people or the most powerful, and then again, they can divide us and they can take the portions that they want and they can undermine our humane kind of trying to craft it. I think it's a wonderful thing. I don't know enough about your system, but I'm really glad you're doing it because I can see that you're really good people and have humanity at your base, yet you're in your heart. But I do think that getting too caught up in that without bringing fiduciary in and saying, look, we've got to address the whole system because the next thing that's coming is mirror molecules which will destroy humanity, or there's other biological stuff that's coming. And just as AI arrived, we are so ingenious as a species. There's going to be a lot more coming. AI is not the end game. There's a lot more coming. And each one of those things is going to be incredible with the greatness that it can bring to us and the horrors that it will bring to us if we don't address the fiduciary element. So whatever you do, I just urge you to make sure that the fiduciary piece, always bring that in as the base. We need to shift the base of the economic system so that it is always humane in everything that it does. Always.
We would certainly welcome and appreciate your guidance on that as we continue to shape the path of the impact that we're making in the work that we're doing too, George. We're getting close to the top of the hour here, and I'm curious, George, you have had so many conversations. You've been a guest on many shows and had many appearances. And have there ever been a question that someone's yet to ask that you've wished that they'd ask?
That's a great question. That's
Well,
my guy.
well, I'll tell you one that, and again, I did mention this ultimately in the book. Yeah, I'm thinking about it. There's not one that exactly comes to mind, but I think talking about the relative value of the three domains of freedom is pretty interesting. And a lot of your focus is, of course, on the life planning aspect because you're in the financial world. And I put that as the second domain of freedom. And the first domain being in that each moment is yours. I think the first domain is the most profound because it gives you everything. But if I were to advise anyone, one of my teenage daughters, anyone, just out of the blue, which of those three would you go to first? Get life planned. Live your life plan. What life planning is really about is it's designing who it is you've always known you really want to be, and then making sure it happens and happens in short order. Usually this is a matter of months that we do in the EVOKE process, how we train. And at most, it's 2 or 3 years. That's the story of your life. You keep telling yourself as you're going through your life, oh, darn, I can't do this. Oh, they're blocking me here, there, whatever. Oh, if only I could do that. So we make sure that happens. And then once you have that and you feel that, then you can go anywhere and you can go back to the moments and you have the courage because you have the story of your life as you want it to manifest. You have the courage to go out and tackle these larger issues about humanity that are so urgent right now, are trying to keep us from addressing.
That is exactly what we needed to hear. So I appreciate that so much because everything that Yasmin has designed has always been from a heartfelt need and want to help others.
Yeah.
And so fiduciary is at the core of it, although we didn't really talk about it in those terms, but that's really, it's there.
Right.
And when I first saw you, when I first saw your fiat, okay, the acronym, I just came back from Europe and I thought, I drove one of those while I was there. So I'm glad you I know, I'm glad you explained that for our audience today. Anyway,
Oh,
Yeah,
uh,
yeah.
wow. Well,
Well,
George, it has been such an incredible experience with you today. Not only learning about yourself, your work, the wisdom that you've shared from the journey, but also to really feel heard and seen. It's interesting, as I say, the interviewer in these types of formats here, a lot of times we're asking the questions and all that, but your own way of your enthusiasm, your smile, your presence, are an incredible listener yourself, and I so appreciate you modeling as well as being what you share in the world, and we are so grateful to have this opportunity to share that with you.
wow, wow. I really hope we meet again, guys. It's been a lot of fun for me as well. Meaningful.
well,
Uh,
you don't have to hope because I know I said to Yasmin just before we started this podcast, I said, I think we need to meet in London. That's what I think we need to do. So, what I'm going to put it out there to the universe, and I'm just going to say that it will happen. I don't know when, but it will happen. And with your guidance and your enthusiasm, I have no doubt.
I will say, and I have a place that I love in some ways even more than London, but it's in the UK, so you can incorporate London with it. And the place I love it just as much, if not more than Hawaii,
Mm.
and that is Cornwall. And my family, we've been going there for 10 years now. It is where we go, where our heart goes there. And we're giving an EVOKE program. We'd love to see you at
Oh,
one EVOKE program there in Cornwall in September. Yeah. So anyway,
wow. Something to look for at in the
yeah,
future.
yeah.
Wow. Well, thank you so much. It's been truly a gift to be here and to share this experience with you, George.
Wonderful. Thank you so much,
Thank
guys.
you. Thank
Yeah,
you. Thank
yeah.
you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you for taking the time to join us today. If you enjoyed this episode or found it valuable, please subscribe, follow, or leave a comment on your favorite platform. If you have friends, clients, or loved ones who are on a transition journey, we invite you to share this show with them. Check out our show notes with links to resources mentioned in this episode at realretirementshow.com. Remember, retirement is a joyful journey we get to experience together. Join us again for another Real Retirement Conversation.